Greetings YouTube, this is your resident Land Cruiser nut. Today in this video I want to talk to you about a major discovery and possible danger related to lifting your 80 that you may not be aware of. If it was not for the tube inspection, I am not sure I would have realized what I'm about to describe to you. And let me give you a little background. At the end of 2019, I put an Old Man Emu 2.5-inch lift on this rig. At the same time, I had new rotors in the front, new shoes and drums in the rear, put a new wheel cylinder also in the rear, and also a new master cylinder. After driving the truck around for a while, the brakes seemed like they just weren't working correctly. I carried it to the shop to help with diagnostic, and they said, it seems like the new master cylinder is faulty. Let's replace it and see if that helps. At the time, it seemed like a marginal improvement, and I was just left with the knowledge that these old 80s really don't stop that well. For the last 2.5 years, I've been driving the truck like this and I've kind of gotten used to the braking power. Fast forward to last month, and the truck arrives here in Germany, and the brake booster is not working, and the master cylinder is leaking. This time I ordered a rather expensive master cylinder and a good brake booster. On that, the 1992 brake booster for the 3FE has been discontinued, so you have to use the brake booster for the 1993 to 1997 model, which requires you to make a longer vacuum line. Your other option is to send your brake booster back to Rock Auto and they will rebuild it. If you're not familiar with the German tube inspection in regard to brakes, basically they put the front wheels on a set of rollers that spin. The system then measures the braking force once the technician applies to the front brakes. Then they do the same for the rear wheels. During my test, the front pressure was lower than it should be, and the rear pressure was showing 0. Yes, that's right, 0. So we are now under the truck. I went home and consulted the factory service manual. That's when I read about this load sensing proportional valve. What this valve is designed to do is modulate the brake fluid pressure to the rear brakes and compensate for various rear loads. As the rear load increases, the spring compresses and the rear axle moves up in relation to the body. This allows for more pressure to be sent to the rear wheels. Here is where the problem comes in. By lifting the rear of the 80 with taller springs, the valve is tricked into thinking there is a light load and reduces the pressure to the rear brakes. Okay, going back to how this works, we're now at the rear axle. And again, what happens is as you put weight into this truck and the axle comes up, it moves this rod. And this rod goes all the way to the valve. And that's what changes the pitch and allows that piston to move up and down. So again, by lifting the truck up, you trick the truck into thinking it has a lighter load. To adjust the valve for the load, the factory service manual has some very specific tools that you need for this, to include pressure gauges that would connect where the bleeder valves are on the... For those of us at home, this is going to be a little trial and error. It starts with adjusting the rear shackle, which is here, and you can see that I've already adjusted mine because it was down here and I moved it up. Now, because we don't have those pressure tools and those pressure gauges, Toyota in the factory service manuals tells you what the distance was from the factory. And at these 2 points here, so you got one, the center of this bolt here and the center of that bolt, it should be 90 millimeters from the factory. Now again, I've already adjusted mine to the maximum mark, which they say is 96 millimeters. So I did this adjustment on the truck and nothing happened. So I went back to the FSM, and it says if you get no change from adjusting the shackle at the rear of the vehicle, you can move forward to adjusting the valve itself. All right, so here's the valve again. And to adjust this valve, what you do is you loosen these 2 bolts here, and that allows the whole unit to slide up or down. Now, by sliding it down, what that's going to do is increase pressure to the front wheels. I did see some changes after I lowered that valve down, but just to the front. Before, my brakes would not lock up at all in the front. Now, after this adjustment, they seem to be a little bit better braking in the front, with the tires wanting to lock up a little bit. Even after all of these adjustments though, I still felt like the brakes weren't working properly and that some additional work needed to be done. But here's another interesting point about that valve. It has a bleeder hanging off the side of it, which, you know, tells me that you need to bleed this valve. But keep in mind, I have bled all 4 wheels, and when I did that, all of the fluid came out clear. But what is confusing is the brake lines come in and out of that, so wouldn't you think that it would clear out any debris that's inside of that valve? Well, the answer is no. When I went to go bleed that valve, the stuff came out of it was pitch black. I mean, it was as black as the underside of this truck, which tells me that may be what some of the problem was, is this thing was overlooked for so long, it may have created an issue. So yesterday, I began to investigate a little bit more. I got the vehicle up on a lift and I removed this drum right here. And when I looked inside the drum, I was stunned. After 2.5 years, everything looked brand new. I got in the truck and I hit the brakes and nothing happened to the rear drum. So then I opened the bleeder valve back here and nothing happened. There was no fluid coming to the rear of the vehicle. So this pretty much told me that I have a bad valve. At this point, you have a few different options. You can either order a new valve, you can delete the valve, or you can get an aftermarket from a company like Willwood. The second and third option are going to cause you to have to do some brake line modifications. I decided to go with a new valve from Toyota. It seems to be the cheaper solution. Another issue that you might have with this valve is getting it off. So those 2 adjusting bolts, I was watching some guys on YouTube take this off and they snapped them. They also snap the ones that go up to the chassis. So be very careful when you get these bolts that you don't snap them. I definitely would apply some penetrating fluid to these things a few days in advance before you take this off. Well, everyone, that's it for today. I hope you've learned something, and I really wanted to make everyone aware of this, before you lift your truck, that you need to make this adjustment. And I wonder how many people are out there with lifted 80s that did not know that they needed to do this, and therefore are operating with insufficient braking power to the rear of the vehicle. Once I get the new valve on, I will do a video about that and let everyone know how it improved the vehicle. Lastly, I want to thank all of my recent subscribers. Thank you so much. I'm getting close to 200 now, and I know that's small, but every subscriber helps. If you like this content, please continue to watch, and I'll continue to try to make some interesting videos for you as I go through these little journeys myself.